Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to talk about a name you might not know, but whose influence has shaped the world in profound ways. We all know the monumental legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a man who moved a nation with his dream of equality and justice. His powerful speeches, his unwavering courage, his ultimate sacrifice, these are cornerstones of modern history. But behind every great person, there is often an unsung hero, a quiet force providing the strength, the wisdom, and the love that fuels their fire. For Dr. King, that person was his mother, Alberta Williams King. And her story, tragically, is one of immense courage and profound sorrow that often gets lost in the long shadow of her famous son. Let's travel back in time, not to the marches or the rallies, but to a small wooden church in Atlanta, Georgia. Ebenezer Baptist Church. This wasn't just a building. It was the heart of the community, a sanctuary, and the spiritual home of the King family. For decades, the sound of the organ filled this sacred space, its melodies lifting the spirits of the congregation, and at the keyboard, more often than not, sat Alberta Williams King. Born in 1904, Alberta was the daughter of Reverend Adam Daniel Williams, the second pastor of Ebenezer. From a young age, she was immersed in the life of the church and the community. She was a gifted student and an exceptionally talented musician. After earning her teaching certificate, she began her career as a school teacher, a profession she deeply loved. However, in those days, married women were often barred from teaching. So when she married Martin Luther King Sr. in 1926, she had to leave the classroom behind. But Alberta's passion for nurturing minds didn't just disappear. It simply changed its address. She poured all her energy into her home and her three children, Willie Christine, Martin Luther Jr., and Alfred Daniel. She created a household grounded in faith, discipline, and, most importantly, love. She taught her children to read before they even started school, instilling in them a lifelong love of learning. More than that, she taught them about dignity. In a world brutally segregated, a world designed to make them feel less than, Alberta taught her children that they were somebody. She countered the daily indignities of racism with powerful lessons of self-worth. She explained the cruel system of segregation but refused to let it poison their hearts with hatred. Instead, she armed them with a sense of divine and personal value that no law or social custom could ever take away. Think about that for a moment. The "I have a dream" speech, the philosophy of nonviolent resistance, the unwavering belief in the beloved community, the seeds of these revolutionary ideas were planted right there, in the King family home, nurtured by a mother's love and wisdom. Martin Luther King Jr. himself credited his mother for his conscience. She was the one who shaped his moral compass, who taught him to love his enemies and to meet hate with love. She was, in every sense, the quiet architect of the movement's soul. As her son rose to become the face of the civil rights movement, Alberta remained a steadfast, grounding presence. She was the one he called for advice, the one whose prayers he relied on. Imagine the constant fear she must have lived with, the endless threats, the bombings, the arrests. Every time her son left home, she didn't know if he would return. Yet, she never asked him to stop. She understood the importance of the cause, and her faith gave her the strength to endure the unimaginable. Then came April 4th, 1968, the day the world stood still. Her son, her beloved Martin, was assassinated in Memphis. The grief was immeasurable, a wound on the soul of a nation, but for Alberta, it was the loss of her child. In the face of this devastating tragedy, she displayed a grace that was almost superhuman. She leaned on her faith, comforted her family, and continued her work within the church, the place that had always been her refuge. The story should end there, with a grieving mother finding solace in her community. But it doesn't. The King family would endure yet another tragedy. Just a year later, her younger son, Alfred Daniel, who had also become a pastor and activist, drowned in a tragic accident. The weight of this double loss is difficult to even comprehend. 2 sons, gone in just over a year. Still, Alberta King persevered. She found her strength, as she always had, at Ebenezer Baptist Church. She returned to her post as the church organist, a role she had held for over 40 years. The music was her prayer, her ministry, her connection to God, and to the memories of her sons. And that brings us to the morning of June 30th, 1974. It was a typical Sunday service at Ebenezer. The church was filled with familiar faces. Alberta King, now 69 years old, sat at the organ, ready to play the Lord's Prayer. As the first notes filled the air, a young man stood up from the front pew, pulled out 2 pistols, and began firing wildly. His intended target was Martin Luther King Sr., but Alberta was struck. She was murdered right there, at her organ, in the sanctuary that had been her lifelong home. The place where she was baptized, married, and had watched her children grow. The very place where she had mourned their deaths. Her death was a brutal, senseless act of violence that sent shockwaves through a community still healing from the traumas of the 1960s. But unlike the assassination of her famous son, Alberta King's murder barely registered on the national conscience. It was a footnote in the larger story, a tragic postscript to a movement. The world had mourned a leader 6 years earlier. It seemed there was little room left to mourn his mother. But her legacy is not one of tragedy alone. It is a legacy of quiet strength, of unshakable faith, and of a love so powerful it could change the world. Alberta Williams King was more than just the mother of a great man. She was a teacher, a musician, a community leader, and the moral anchor of one of history's most important families. She faced the deepest sorrows a person can endure, yet she never lost her grace or her belief in the power of love. Her life reminds us that history isn't just made on grand stages and in front of massive crowds. It's also made in the quiet moments, in a mother's lessons, in a family's prayers, and in the steady, courageous love that refuses to be extinguished by hate. So the next time you hear the words, "I have a dream," take a moment to remember the woman who first taught him how to dream, the quiet strength behind the movement, Alberta Williams King. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched you, please give this video a like, and consider subscribing for more stories that matter. We'll see you in the next one.